You can go when you're ready. Good morning, everyone. I think we've got people steadily joining. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Okay, well, we'll kick off our session today. Thank you so much for joining us today for the NEM Connections Hub webinar. This is the second webinar that we are hosting about this subject matter. Please note that this webinar will be recorded by AEMO and may include the use of AI support. The recording will be published online, including the slides presented. By attending the webinar, you consent to AEMO recording and using the recording for this purpose. No other recording, including the use of any other AI functionality or transcription, is permitted. So if we do see some AI joining, they may be sort of removed from the session as we are recording this ourselves. Now, before we kick off, my name is Laura Murphy. I am the facilitator for this webinar today, and I just want to hand across to our group manager, Margarita Pimentel, for onboarding and connections, just for a welcome. Over to you, Margarita.
Thanks, Laura, and good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'd just like to start by actually acknowledging and thanking many of the organisations and individuals across industry who've actually contributed their time, expertise and feedback throughout the development of the NEM Connection Hub, or what we refer to as the NEM Connection Hub. We've been really pleasantly surprised by the willingness of developers, network service providers, OEMs, consultants and industry to engage openly with us. And that's really been instrumental in shaping the capability that we're sharing with you today. As we all know, and we've all talked, I'm sure we all talk about it pretty much almost every day, the energy transition is driving unprecedented levels of connection activity across the national electricity market. At the same time, we're seeing projects that are becoming larger, more technically complex, and increasingly dependent on how we coordinate across multiple parties and how we can make sure that that's actually effective. The challenge we face isn't simply one of volume. It's also about ensuring that the way we work together can scale to support the pace of investment and the change that we're seeing coming to us. That's why we feel that the NEM Connection Hub is so important. It's not just about introducing technology for its own sake. It's actually about creating a more transparent, efficient and scalable way for developers, NSPs, OEMs and AEMO to collaborate throughout the whole connection lifecycle. Our objective is to create one common source of truth, and that really looks at improving visibility, reducing unnecessary administrative effort, providing clearer tracking of information and decisions, and ultimately supporting a more efficient progression of connection projects. We're also conscious that it's equally important to ensure that we can collaborate with confidence. So we do recognise that connection projects involve commercially sensitive and technically sensitive information. The hub's been designed with security, confidentiality, and controlled access at its core, because to us, trust is essential for effective collaboration across industry. What I'm particularly proud of is that this has been a genuinely collaborative effort. Many of the capabilities that you'll see here today are a direct result of industry feedback. You did challenge our assumptions, you did identify areas of friction, you highlighted where greater visibility was needed, and you actually helped us design a solution that better reflects the realities of operating in today's connections environments. Today's webinar is an opportunity to share the progress we've made together, demonstrate how your feedback has shaped the design, and provide a look ahead to the next stages of delivery. And I really did just want to thank you on behalf of AEMO for your ongoing partnership and commitment to improving how we work together as an industry. Thank you very much, and I'll hand across to Laura so that she can begin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Margarita, and very well said. If we just move to our next slide, we'll just do an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, seas and waters across Australia. We honour the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past and present, and embrace future generations. We acknowledge that wherever we work, we do so on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lands. We pay respect to the world's oldest continuing culture and First Nations people's deep and continued connection to country, and hope that our work can benefit both people and country. Now we'll be taking questions today via Slido. So you'll see on the screen today, you can either access it via the QR code, there is an access code also provided, or a link in the chat. So we'll be having a dedicated time towards the end of the session where we can capture these questions. And if you've got anything, you can upvote other people's questions as they come through if you do would like to ask a similar questions. So please don't use the Teams chat. We're using the Slido functionality today. Our agenda for today. So our agenda will be as follows. We've got a bit of a welcome and an open objectives of this session. Then we'll move into our overview of the NEM Connections Hub, also called the Hub. So you might frequently hear us referring to it as that. Then we'll move on to stage one, the solutions register, giving you an overview of how that stage one is intending to roll out. And then stage two, the project lifecycle management and file exchange and the timeframes around that project. And then we'll move into our last portion of questions. So our session today is roughly around an hour and a half. We're having about 30 minutes of question time towards the end so we can adequately answer all questions that come to mind. If we move to the next slide, our purpose of today's webinar. So we last caught up in November of 2025 to introduce the concept of the NEM Connections Hub. So we would like to share our progress since November and that first webinar. We also want to explain how stakeholder feedback has helped shape the hub. We've had lots of sessions in industry forums where we're helping to work together and design how this would be fit for purpose and a single source of truth for industry. We'd like to also confirm stage one and deliver how stage two is evolving. And that final point is about answering some questions as we understand that there are lots of different questions that you might have following this session. Now, our presenters today will be Rachel Ackland, Team Lead of the Improvements and Analytics, and Zach Gill, the Principal Project Manager for Process Improvement. I'll hand over to Rachel now. She'll take us through an overview of the hub and then also into stage one. So handing to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Laura. So as Margarita introduced in her opening, we do recognise that that change is needed, and I think this really stems from the higher volumes of connections that we have now, and we can acknowledge that the existing manual ways of working, where we have email-driven workflows, just really simply won't scale, and we do require more efficient processes. So a secure collaboration tool is needed for us all to use and benefit from. And when I say us all, I mean network service providers, proponents, and AEMO, and also OEMs and consultants working on these projects. So AEMO is developing the new NEM Connections Hub, as Laura mentioned, the hub, which is intended to really reduce manual handling, reducing the number of emails and separate files used to manage queries and update information relating to connection projects. It's also intended to provide a single source of truth for project and query management. It's intended to strengthen traceability with activity history and decision records, and really increasing certainty for proponents as progress is made and decisions are really locked in, and to support secure exchange of documents, models, and files, and benefiting from having a consistent controlled process for sharing and storing these secure files. And certainly having consistency across different regions and different networks is also that benefit. So AEMO has taken the lead, building a system to meet AEMO's highest standards for storage and access, and really building a fit-for-purpose tool that's got capabilities designed specifically for the connections process. So just stepping onto how the NEM Connections Hub will be rolled out, or the way we're planning to deliver it. It'll be delivered in 2 stages, with the solutions register being delivered first. And this solution register is seen as being able to improve how technical and project queries are raised, managed, resolved, and also tracked. And it will actually replace the individual trackers or the Excel issues tracker that you're commonly using today. So the solution register is being delivered first quite intentionally to deliver these benefits as quickly as possible. So bringing the improved governance and streamlined information transfer, and also having that better traceability, better data security, and greater certainty and efficiency as well. So as you can see here, go live is planned for February 2027. This is later than we originally communicated to you when we last spoke to this broad audience last November. Back then we were in the feasibility stage, and through the more detailed design and planning stages that we've worked through, we now have a much more firm plan through to go live. So we've developed this. We are excited to share some of our progress with you today on the solution register. So a bit more of that to come. So the second stage, in stage 2, those original functions will be expanding on the functions to provide project lifecycle management, progress tracking, and secure file exchange. And stage 2 will also enable current methods of collecting the key connections information to be retired, and it will also replace the system strength repository, project repository. Engagement with the industry stakeholders for stage 1 really focused on validating how users access and the query lifecycle and how that should work. And this introduced some really important additional features as we worked through that with these stakeholder groups. Subsequent engagement with focus groups focused on the stage 2 features, the project lifecycle management and secure file exchange. And we thank the people who did nominate themselves, which they nominated themselves following the previous webinar. And we really appreciate the way that those working groups have really leaned in to discuss some of the media topics and to ensure that we have a fit for purpose solution. So maybe it's just worth touching here on what the scope of projects which are going to be covered in the tool. So the system will actually cater for, I guess, generation and large load connections. That is, it's going to be designed for initial connections and also for alteration projects. And when we talk about alterations, we certainly are considering both greenfield alterations, those that are really planned connection projects with an alteration going on, and also brownfield alterations. And these we consider as alterations that happen for plant that has already been commissioned. It's also notable is that the early assessment framework projects is catered for in this solution, and this is where models are assessed without being site or project specific, and this work is conducted between AEMO and the equipment manufacturers. So as we roll out these features in stage 1 and stage 2, stakeholders should notice over time that that there's going to be less reliance on spreadsheets, emails, and multiple versions of trackers. There will be shared visibility of project progress, shared visibility of query progress, of ownership and outcomes, and more consistency of reviews and queries raised. There'll be stronger traceability of decisions with activity history being recorded and having that governance and record of the deferral and closure of queries. Streamlined project lifecycle management and file exchange so that face-to-face time can really focus on solving more complex problems. We've got experts who do workshops to solve these complex problems, and that's what we hope people are spending their face-to-face time doing. And certainly having that streamlined project lifecycle management, as I mentioned before, will enable us to replace the key connections information data capture and review processes. We also expect that stakeholders will notice better governance and oversight through consistent workflows, defined responsibilities and auditable records, and that really should enable better management and continue improvement over time. So I'm keen to share the timeline and of these projects, and just really looking at where we've been, where we are now and where we're going next. So as was mentioned before, since we had our last webinar with you, there's been a lot of activity. We've run some one-to-one sessions with each and every NSP, and this really fed into the user access design and the solution register design quite specifically. So the development of these and testing of the solution register functions is actually currently underway, and it's really progressing at pace. That's where we are now. And as I mentioned, the launch is planned for February 2027. So it's probably worth mentioning and unpacking that we've had these targeted workshops. We've put them in both places here, but these targeted workshops were with various focus groups. And as I mentioned, people had nominated themselves following the previous webinar, so thanks to them. And really between March and June this year, we had 3 separate working groups. We had one for TNSPs, one with GNSPs, and one that had a combination of proponents and consultants and OEMs represented. And with each of these working groups, we had 4 workshops to really validate and refine how the project lifecycle management and the file exchange functions needed to work in the system. And we also held one session where we specifically just walked through the solution register functions and also the screens, sort of the mocked up screens that really take the user through the journey. We are setting, I think I've got here, that we're setting up a web page for progressive updates about the NEM Connections Hub. We're preparing this, and this should go live shortly, and this will be enable us to really provide some incremental updates as we work through the project. We are here now, obviously having this webinar today, and it's worth noting that where we're going, we plan in coming months to share with you some solution previews for the solution register. And we're then moving to the testing and readiness activities. So testing will first be conducted with an AEMO, and then there will be some testing with industry as well. And we're looking to work with our focus groups, or a subset of our focus group members, to play this role. And it's probably worth noting that this testing will be quite structured and required to be delivered in a fairly tight time frame. So we'll be a lot of planning to deliver that efficiently. You'll notice here that we're basically planning around that busy peak period. So we're really trying to plan around that so that when everyone's got their head down in December with the busy peak period, and then following that, there's that December, January time when people are often enjoying holidays. We are planning around that. So that's where you've got the solution previews and the final training and onboarding ready for launch happening from late January through February. And then obviously support following that. I guess probably worth noting that right now, with working with stage 2, we are certainly well and truly into the requirements and design phase, and we plan to have at least one more workshop with our focus groups, really to knuckle down some of those more tricky things that we're working through and ensure we've got things right and fit for purpose, ready to move into development and testing early next year. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover. Sorry, I just jumped back there. There may have been a couple of other things. Nope, that's it. Thanks very much. What I'll do now is jump into a bit more detail about the stage 1 and solution register, where we're really trying to simplify the query management and strengthen traceability. Basically, just to unpack where we are now and what the future state provides with regards to the solution register, we're really replacing the Excel-based issue tracker that is commonly and currently used, and where you've got really multiple versions of files. We're moving to this online solution register as the single source of truth for queries and responses, and really resolving each query. We're moving from having manual email trails and traceability challenges to having time-stamped activity history and consistent workflows through to resolution and closure. We're moving from having limited visibility of status and certainly of ownership of the queries and the resolution, and really looking at to a new state where we've got clear assignment of queries and who's resolving, clear priority status for each and every query. And when we talk about a query, you know, this is this can be raised by any party that's working on the project. So it could be RFIs, it could be technical queries, project queries. Decisions sometimes, I think, get revisited, and part of the new design there is this ability to have key decision outcomes captured to really lock in these decisions and give certainty to our developers moving forward as they progress through the connections process. Where it's currently difficult to understand progress in this new solution, there'll be search, filtering and dashboards and views for the project. You can drill down to project stage, priority and status of queries to really support the effective management as we're working through to resolve all queries and progress through the connection project stage. So really wanted to today to explain, I guess, how industry's inputs really helped to shape the solution register. So during the many industry workshops, we heard some consistent and important feedback, and certainly this revolved around the need for better visibility, improved coordination, and robust user and access management. Quite specifically, we heard that some users are going to require access to project information after commissioning, and we are providing for this. We heard that portfolio visibility and management level access is important, and we've introduced a read-only role to meet these needs. We heard that exporting of data from the solution register is important, and there are some specific and defined use cases that require this. We're still actually working on this, and we must note that for the February go live, the solution will be relying on some workaround processes where AEMO personnel will provision this information for externals, but then we plan to provide this in full for our external users at a later date. File and image uploads linked to specific queries and responses. This is an important feature to address the current pain points. And I will just note here that this is being provided. We're just noting there that image files will need to be opened and they won't be rendered within the text, which could have been some people's expectation, but unfortunately this technical solution we're working with doesn't currently provide. One of the themes that we certainly heard was around the better project coordination. So we heard from stakeholders that there really is a benefit in AEMO and NSP sometimes being able to align before they post their query for others to commence working on. So this option has been injected into the design after we've heard that fairly loud and clear from quite a number of stakeholders. We heard that having the ability to draft queries before they're published is an important feature, and certainly giving that flexibility to publish as they're drafted, to also do that peer review before they're drafted, or to even collect a few together and publish them after the drafts are collected. So there's that flexibility there. We also heard there's a need for some complex organisation structures to be catered for. We learnt that that there are some cases where there might be a pool of people effectively working across projects which are connecting to different network organisations. So to cater for this, we've worked on that, and that will be included in the design we've got. We certainly also heard that there was, important things under the stronger use of management security. So overseas user access with robust cyber protections is certainly important that we can cater for this. And we've certainly been working through this to make sure that it's been well thought through as we've gone through. But simply put, we will employ a process of whitelisting, and onboarding for overseas users will require some additional steps and support, but we've definitely catered for this. Automatically managing the inactive user accounts. When we had our workshops, there was broad support for this. So if users are not active in the system for some time, then we're building a system that can drive notification and then also automatic deactivation, so we can stay on top of any inactive user accounts. And we acknowledge that we need to support multiple users being assigned admin roles. Obviously, we need backup and redundancy when performing these roles. Okay. Jumping into the solution register and the life cycle of a query. This might be familiar from our first webinar. I think we ran through something fairly similar. Probably worth noting here that when we talk, as I mentioned, when we talk about queries, this could be used for RFIs, any query raised by a stakeholder working on the project really sits in this project life, or this query life cycle. So the process enables the user to draft the query and review it with their peers, and their peers being people within their organisation or the consultants that are working with them on the project. This is the step that I mentioned before, where the AEMO and NSP can choose. They have the option to cross-review queries raised prior to publishing. Obviously, they could delete if necessary. And then queries are assigned to an organisation who is expected to respond, and they're published. And then we work through the respond and resolve. So responding, perhaps reassigning to somebody else to respond, and also noting we've got this key decision outcome that can be, the query may require it or not, but if it is required, that would need to be done prior to closing. So I think we see this clear decision, the key decisions would provide that clear sort of summary of the outcome and providing that more certainty. So we are pretty keen to share just a few of the mocked up screens that that the developers are referencing as they build the system. So this one shows how the new query is created and saved for review, assigned, and then published for all users assigned to the project to see. And when the query is, sorry. This, we're just showing this screen. So obviously when you come to the key decision outcome, if one is required, it needs to be added prior to the query being closed. And obviously if a query is being deferred to a later stage, then really defining that and having that query traced right through is important. So we're just showing you some of these screens here as well. Okay, so what we wanted to share here was some of the screens that we have mocked up for our developers to use as they build the system. And this one I really want to share with you to try and unpack so everyone has a common understanding of how the user access management has been designed. So user management, if you think of this as a menu of all the users from each organisation who actually have access to the solution register, it really just is managed by each organisation. So that's really an important thing to know. And we see that this would be done by an organisation admin. This doesn't actually provision people to work on particular projects. It really just provisions them with access to the solution register. And maybe just a little bit of a note here that probably useful within your organisations to start identifying the people in your organisation who can manage user access. If I move on to these screens which are specific for the project. So project access is provisioned is provisioned specifically to each user and managed by an organisation. For an example, if you're at a particular NSP, they would be able to manage their own, who from their organisation can access and see details within each project and actually raise queries and contribute to responses and close those queries as well. So the intent there is that the role assignment, a portfolio lead from each organisation can allocate individual people from the menu we saw on the previous screen. They can allocate them to projects as either a project administrator, and the project administrator role can actually add other project contributors, and they can also interact fully themselves, as I mentioned, raising queries, closing queries, etc. And the project contributors can also interact fully with that project. And without being allocated to a project, if I just switch back, as a user that has been provisioned with access to the tool, you'll be able to see only the projects that your organisation is involved with, just the names of the projects and some bare bones information, but you wouldn't be able to actually see the detail and interact with it. So it's just those two layers. Just wanted to unpack that for you. And probably worth noting that the same person within your organisation could play both roles, the portfolio lead or the organisation admin. I'm hoping that makes some sense. So if we just step through how security, access and user obligations will be managed. We obviously find security is of utmost importance with the sensitive information that is sometimes shared with these connections projects. And so we can assure that the information will be stored securely. It'll be stored in cloud storage securely within Australia. The security controls will be aligned with the relevant NER requirements. Access will be managed carefully. User access, as I mentioned, will be managed by each organisation, which we went through on the last couple of slides. The project level access will as well be controlled by each organisation and really be controlled so users only access the relevant project information that they need to. They wouldn't have broad access to all project information. And multi-factor authentication will be required. And this really is reliant on users' valid and registered emails. So users' emails are expected to follow the same domain for their organisation. So we'll have those checks in place, and also using an authenticator app to log in with a one-time code. So that style of multi-factor authentication is being employed. Now, if we think about security, obviously people risk is one of the real risks. So we do have this shared obligation as users to protect the data within the solution register and within the NEM Connections Hub more broadly. So the secure use of the hub is going to be a shared responsibility, and organisations and individual users will be signing up to some terms and conditions. So there will be clear expectations set out for data protection and the responsible use and user access management. So users will be asked to accept those relevant terms and conditions before accessing the NEM Connections Hub. So I guess it's a bit of a call out to organisations just in that general preparedness to start identifying the people within your organisation who manage cybersecurity, legal reviews and user access, because prior to the go live next February, AEMO will be in contact with organisations just to do some of those setup activities, and really they are designed to ensure streamlined access process. Just one second. I will hand over now to Zach Gill, who works on improvements and is certainly an integral part of delivering this solution. Over to you, Zach.
Thanks, Rachel. And yeah, thanks all for your participation and your engagement up until now and in this session today. So yeah, stage 2 of the NEM Connections Hub. So this is where we're really moving beyond query management and the solution register that Rachel's just run through into the broader project lifecycle and secure file exchange. So in the following slides, I'll just talk through some of the key design components and really the direction of stage 2. So first of all, what's the vision? So really to modernise the NEM connections process, as Rachel mentioned, that we've been doing a lot of engagement with stakeholders and the focus groups, and we've heard a lot of the pain points, and clearly the current state simply won't scale to be able to meet the future needs and the energy transition. There's a real clear need for us to work smarter, so clearer project tracking, more consistent information, ensuring sensitive data is shared securely. Reducing the time spent chasing updates, reconciling information, managing files. And I just wanted to highlight that this is not about replacing the conversations that need to happen. It's really about giving everyone a better shared view to work from and really enable us to focus our time on the important work that actually gets projects through the process and ultimately connected to the NEM. So in terms of the points on this slide here, which I'll talk through briefly. So really just looking at the current state, so those pain points that we've really been working on identifying, and then the future state in terms of the design direction for stage 2. So as I mentioned, project updates at the moment are really email-based. Meetings, trackers being sent around is quite inefficient. I'm sure we would all agree. So really moving towards a future state where we have a central view of all stages, milestones, and information about projects. Similarly, project information is currently shared in a fairly ad hoc manner between parties and constantly having to try and keep each other up to date in terms of where things are at and different details as the projects morph over time. So essentially providing a central platform for that information to be shared, and that's consistent central source of truth for individual projects. In terms of submission requirements, of course, there's a lot of variability based on different parts of the NEM, different technology types, different contexts, different connection locations. So the system is intended to basically provide guidance on that and allow that to be tailored by AEMO and SP so that everyone's on the same page of exactly what's required and when, and be able to make submissions relevant to particular stages of the process, depending on where the project's at. Sensitive data is obviously a real focal point and a really important component of the NEM Connections Hub. So at the moment, it's shared quite inconsistently with varying controls. So really providing that controlled role-based access within the system, as Rachel's mentioned before, assigning permissions, etc., for particular projects, for particular users, which I'll step through in a bit more detail shortly. The file sharing itself, so currently, as we know, files are shared across all sorts of different ways, emails, different file share platforms, attachments, maybe Teams messages sometimes is a little bit hard to track and really know what's going on. So the intent is for the future state to be a secure central file exchange capability so that everyone can be on the same page and have that central location. Review status of particular artifacts. As we know, there's quite a list of artifacts that are required to be submitted and go through the process. So it can be difficult to track where exactly where each artifact is at. So the system, once again, is intended to provide that transparent visibility of review progress for particular artifacts and, of course, outcomes as milestones are reached and things are bedded down. Also, the history of projects, as we know, they can span many years and it can be difficult to have traceability of prior versions or history of the projects in general. So really intended to provide clear version history for files and the project more broadly, and the latest version of those accepted files as time goes by. I do need to point out that while stage 1, the solution register, is moving at pace, and as Rachel explained, the development is underway as we speak, whereas stage 2 is still in the design phase. So some of these features being discussed are technically still subject to ongoing assessments and will be confirmed in due course. So a key component of stage 2 is establishing that shared view of project information that I've just touched on. So as I said, as we know, a lot of project information is currently collected and maintained across a variety of systems, across the different stakeholders involved in projects, and relies on constant back and forth in emails, meetings, spreadsheets, etc., in order to keep each other up to date, which of course is not particularly efficient. So stage 2 is really intended to provide a clear central view of current project information for stakeholders involved in each project. And it's not just about storing information, it's actually about structuring it so that it can support broader project tracking, forecasting, reporting, and also continuity as project teams' ownership and also responsibilities change over the life cycle of a project. This is, of course, becoming increasingly more important as we're all being asked to report more on information on connections projects to really help steer the energy transition. So really the hub is intended to provide that sort of central, trusted source of data for all the various reporting and visibility requirements for each organisation, of course being NSPs, proponents and AEMO. So things like the connection scorecard that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, key connections information, data collection process, as Rachel mentioned before, the intent is to basically retire that process and bring that into this central system. Things like quarterly energy dynamics, the QED, government reporting by NSPs and more. So really having that central source of truth that everyone can rely on. So stepping into another layer of detail, so really the shared project view is intended to enable stakeholders to track key project information in the hub, the new central system. So really be able to see at a glance a view of where projects are at, which stages they're at, particularly across a portfolio where a particular organisation has a significant portfolio. But also within a project, provide that central view of key milestones, timelines, what has happened in the past, what actuals have been achieved, what's coming up, and the dates that all parties are working towards. So really have that sort of common view of what's to come and the end goals. I won't necessarily read all the data on this screen. There's quite a bit there. It's really just to illustrate the full connections process lifecycle. But I did want to call out that, as we mentioned earlier, so it is intended to replace the key connections information data collection process, which is a little bit clunky. I'm sure we can all agree with the Excel-based spreadsheets, really bringing that into the system because all of that information about those projects will inherently be in the system. System strength project repository for those NSPs in the call would be familiar with that. So bringing that once again into the system and removing those duplicate data collection processes. In terms of the full connections lifecycle, so you will note that we've included the connection inquiry phase. Of course, is something that AEMO is not traditionally involved in. We don't have a particular role with the exception of the system strength preliminary impact assessment. But I think in the context of this central source of truth and really providing this full visibility and traceability of the lifecycle, we're seeing it is useful to be able to at least track the dates with respect to the inquiry process, but of course allow the existing tools and systems to continue in terms of what the way NSPs are currently working, but also provide the flexibility for those artifacts to be uploaded and to really leverage the system if that's desired for a particular project in a particular region. So be able to upload your connection inquiry response, use the solution register to track queries between parties, but of course leave that flexible. Similarly, you'll note pre-application here, of course, is going to be part of the system. As we all know, that's an optional stage, so of course can be skipped through, but the capabilities there for us to basically share artifacts between each other, track the progress of that, and also be able to undertake that assessment, raise queries in the solution register, etc. Similarly, proponent implementation is obviously quite a specific scope of work, and especially with the commercially sensitive discussions that happen as part of that in terms of negotiating the connection agreement, we would anticipate that that would stay outside of the system, but still track that more broadly in terms of the point in time where the project does get the connection agreement executed and becomes committed, but leave those sensitive commercial discussions to remain outside the tool. So into the bottom half of this slide here. So in terms of the overall life cycle and those key dates, so one of the key sort of design direction is around enabling the proponent to provide the anticipated dates for the project schedule, just so that all parties are on the same page of the broader project plan and when those ultimate dates are being forecast in terms of commissioning, etc. And then allow all three parties, as per the current process, to really agree on those forecasts, especially the ones that are most immediate, so that everyone's working on the same page and we've all got clear expectations of what's ahead and the goals that we've set. And of course, last but not least, is capture the actual dates, so we have good, clear traceability of what happened and when, and be able to look back on that in the future. And that would then feed into, quite naturally, the progression of the project through the connections process lifecycle. So extending that shared view to submission and assessment status of individual artifacts. So we're seeing this as key in terms of being able to track the assessment of artifacts throughout the connections process lifecycle. and perhaps just to be clear on what I mean by when I say artifact. So as an example, in the case of, say, a GPS, of course, is an individual PDF or Microsoft Word file, is in itself an artifact in this context, but equally a collection of files. For example, Connection Study Report is, of course, a collection of several PDFs, or perhaps a PSSE model, which is, of course, a collection of several files, DLLs, DYRs, etc. Each of those equally is an artifact in this context. So really this is about reducing reliance on separate file sharing tools, as we've discussed earlier, emails, all sorts of various ways of sharing information, and really bringing that together into this central system and having that good visibility of different versions, what's current, see the version history, and also be able to see where the assessment is up to for that particular artifact for a particular project stage. So the intent is really to provide that clear visibility of the status, in this case being NSP review, AEMO review, which, as we know, can at times be either in parallel or sequenced, but also, and then ultimately becoming a final version once the milestone's reached. Of course, with variability across different regions and across different contexts and tech types, etc., there needs to be flexibility in terms of the different types of artifacts that are shared, including those that don't necessarily require assessment, which of course wouldn't go through this review and assessment lifecycle. Another key component is, of course, facilitating resubmission of artifacts, and also being able to provide visibility of earlier versions, and also the capability to provide a change summary for greater traceability when we're looking back at historical versions in the future, be able to at a glance see the differences and why a new version was submitted and have an understanding of what the key differences are. So controlled access to sensitive data is, of course, a supercritical design feature. It's not an add-on. Its security and access control and traceability are really core to the design of the NEM Connections Hub and Stage 2 with the artifact exchange. So your feedback has been really crucial to get this right, and we really appreciate the inputs that we've had through the focus group sessions earlier this year. And we fully understand how important this is, given the nature of the intellectual property that's being exchanged as part of the connections process. So in a nutshell, really the access is intended to be managed at two levels. So there's users that are granted access to a particular project for each organization, and then users granted specific access to specific sensitive artifacts, in addition to the standard access that they would get as part of their organization being assigned to the project. So in terms of the different levels that are being envisaged is standard, so those lower sensitivity artifacts that would be accessible to those assigned project users for each organization. Then really segregating out restricted artifacts, things like PSCAD models, which would require that specific additional permission to be granted on a per user basis for each organization. Similarly, highly restricted, such as block diagrams, would require that specific additional user permission. And then last but definitely not least, source code would be treated separately once again, as it is quite critically sensitive, and that would basically retain the extremely limited access that is to just a couple of AEMO employees, which is consistent with the existing arrangements. So really the intent is to establish default levels for these specific artifact types, but enable flexibility for this to be reduced where required, such as, for example, synchronous connection projects. So really, in a nutshell, the key principle is controlled access. So maintaining that project visibility while also making sure sensitive artifacts are only accessible by those explicitly assigned users. All right, so yeah, that was just a bit of a summary of some of the key design components and the direction for Stage 2. As I mentioned, we are currently refining the design for Stage 2, and we're working closely with our delivery team as we progress towards development, which is expected in the new year following the launch of Stage 1. So I'll hand over to Laura to take us through what's next and the Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Zach. Now if we move on to our next slide. Now, we're just wanting to explain how we continue to work with stakeholders as we progress through the development and through implementation of the first stage. So we're going to be providing ongoing updates to to stakeholders. We continue to share these updates of the design, the testing and the onboarding details as they are confirmed throughout this development process. We'll also be providing you with access to onboarding materials. So organisations will receive more information about access and onboarding materials and required agreements ahead of the implementation. So there'll be some further testing and as Rachel mentioned during the Solutions Register portion of this session, we'll be doing some showcasing of how the tool is being developed, and then we'll also be explaining how we intend to implement the onboarding process. And the final piece will be this training and support. So once we get closer to go live in February of 2027, training materials, support materials, and also further engagement opportunities will be available and provided prior to the launch. Now, we can see that there are lots of questions that are coming through into Slido. So we have moved into the Q&A portion of our session today. Now, I'll do my best to moderate as we've got lots of different topics that we want to cover across stage 1 and stage 2. Where possible, I will collate some of the questions together and ask the team if we see some common themes that are coming through. Now you can upvote other people's questions, as you can see that they've come in and review them on the screen. That will elevate it up in the queue and I can answer the questions from top to bottom. So the first question we have here is from Miriam. So how does it work for different jurisdiction DNSPs having different stages and processes and time taken at each stage? So Zach or Rachel, who would like to take this question?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go at that one. It sounds like it's intended to stage 2. Yeah, so really the system, as I've just been discussing, has really got flexibility in mind. So it's not about sort of forcing any particular project down a particular pathway or into some kind of predefined process. It's really about that flexibility. So with different regions, as they operate differently, there may be different documentation requirements, different artifacts that might be required, maybe partial packages that might be submitted early and then a full package later, things that might happen in pre-application stage. Perhaps for some large load connections, there wouldn't be, for example, registration in a lot of cases. So the system is really being designed with that in mind and really providing that flexibility for all parties to work within the system based on the specific context of that project. Hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to pop another one in if I've missed something.
Thanks, Zach. Now, I've got lots of questions about the Excel tracker. So since the Excel tracker will be replaced, has there been any thought given to how the new tool will integrate with other third-party tools that industry may be using to manage our projects? Now, I'll also add on to that, as we've got a couple of questions about existing tools in industry and whether there'll be any integration with them.
I'll step in, see if I can try to answer that. I'm not 100% sure what other tools people are referencing when they're asking that question, so maybe it's a little bit difficult. And I know there was another question in there which probably related to schedules, etc. as well. So I'm not sure whether that's related to, if anyone wants to come off mute and perhaps clarify. But at this stage, the solution register isn't planned to integrate. So when we go live in February, there isn't integration. And in the working group sessions that we've had with all the various stakeholders, this hasn't really been raised to integrate with any particular solutions. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but might be helpful to understand what that third-party tools we're talking about, whether they're actually doing solution register or whether we're talking about adjunct processes.
I believe the question, there's a couple of questions referencing a tool called AEMO. I believe that's the tool.
Yeah,
Rachel?
which is used in construction. Yes. Probably it's worth noting that with a lot of the work that's been done, we are really trying to make sure that this is very fit for purpose around, and I know AEMO certainly does provide for a lot of that, the file exchange and the progress tracking, etc. With the solution register, we feel like we've got a fairly established way of working, and what we're trying to do is not to change that terribly, but really address the pain points and make it a streamlined process online. And to do that, we're designing a fit for purpose system that can be used across the connections process. I guess when it comes to stage 2, acknowledging that some of the features and functions with the project lifecycle management and with the secure file exchange absolutely are similar to what the likes of AConnect can produce, but this is, I guess, by doing this in-house, we can ensure that we've got files secure, as AEMO is really treating that as one of the utmost important features, that we've actually got secure file exchange, the handling of it and the storing, acknowledging that models for connections across the NEM are all being stored in one place. So that is a factor when we're thinking about who's hosting and building a solution that meets those needs. So that's just something to keep in mind, and that's part of the reason why AEMO is looking to host this. And we do see that we are the common participant in connection projects, which sort of positions us to do that. As far as integrating, if there is activities happening in these external tools, I think that was probably more the angle of the question. Are we going to actually integrate with that? I guess the simple answer is we're not. But again, if that's a topic for workshops, or if someone can bring more information to light, we can try and unpack that a bit further.
Thank you, Rachel. Now I've got a question sort of further elaborates on the Excel-based question, but do we see that this will replace email-based instructions and directions coming from AEMO and the NSP? And perhaps in addition to that, we want to ask the question around what correspondence will be captured in the register and also in the hub long term.
That is a good question. So we do see it's pretty, it provides for fairly broad use. I mean, we look at the current state and the technical and project queries that are captured in the issue tracker today. That is a clear transfer of what we would expect to be handled within the solution register. But in addition to that, like I said, if it really can operate for anyone raising a query related to that project, and those queries will be categorized into topics. So if we've got RFIs, etc., then it can cater for that as well. Sorry, does that answer that question?
I believe so.
Jump in, Zach, if you've got anything more.
No, I think you read my mind, Rach. I think that was my
Okay.
my response as well. Yeah, keeping it flexible. I think flexibility is probably the key word in my mind.
Great. Now we have a question. Is there a NER clause that will enforce the hub on all NEM participants?
I do not believe there is an NER clause that will enforce that. We are really looking to build this fit for purpose so that it brings benefit to everybody. And I think there is benefit when working on a project when all stakeholders are using it. And so we look to that we believe that everybody will uptake and use it for that very reason, not because there's a NER clause relates to it.
Great. Now we have some questions regarding,
Sorry.
oh yes, Margareta.
Sorry, Laura, I might just jump in there as well, just to provide a little bit more context. So the intention wasn't to force parties to use this system. However, we've talked a lot as an industry about how we need to come together to create shared solutions rather than necessarily create our own solutions. And we've talked a lot about creating efficiencies across industry and creating consistency of process and approach across industry as well. And that's what we're trying to facilitate here. If you do have particular concerns about utilising this platform and you want to discuss that with us, please feel free to reach out to Rachel, Zach, myself, anyone in the onboarding and connections group, because we're really here to want to understand what your particular challenges might be in utilising this tool and leveraging this tool. But we do really want to see how we can actually bring industry together on a common platform and be able to reduce costs, reduce duplication, reduce inefficiencies that might come with manual handling and different streams of communication as well. We'd like to bring that all together to be able to make this process more efficient. I'll hand back across to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, Margarita. We have a couple of questions here regarding the when we start using this. So when does this apply to projects across the connections process? And so there's an example provided. If a project is in R0 and not yet at 534, or if it has already achieved 534/ offer to connect. So perhaps this will be an opportunity to explain the implementation process, Rachel, and when we see projects starting to be integrated into the system.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think having run through some of those benefits, and I think from people having an understanding of just how much easier it's going to be to manage queries and also looking back at key decision outcomes and that kind of thing, the sooner we're in there, the better. But yeah, I understand it's a very practical question as to when is the right time for a project to then start adopting the solution register. Really, if we're near the start of a stage or about to commence a stage, I think that is the opportunity where we start to use the solution register. It's clean, it's a clean start. And so I think to that specific question, if R0 was complete and the 534 was already issued, the next time, which is in that R1 capability assessment, once that, on commencement of that, being in the solution register and raising queries there from the get-go, I'd see that as the clear opportunity. But I think it'll be on a project by project basis. If there has been a little bit of work done and there's been some progress made in R0 and everybody wants to then put some of that history into the project and for the benefits we're going to get because you are still near the start, there's that opportunity. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And I think we've also got some questions here regarding the commencement and go live in February 2027. So how AEMO intends to integrate. So the questions will be about from 2027, Feb 2027, will projects all start using the hub and sort of what if projects are midway through?
I think if the question is, are they sort of midway, hopefully I've sort of answered that, but because I think as the work is done through that application stage, I guess from when the application package is first submitted to the NSP or AEMO, that's really the work really progresses right through to 534. As Zach mentioned, during that proponent implementation stage in our workshops, it was considered that a lot of those contract negotiations would be done outside the system, and really the next time the work is heating up in the solution register would be in the R1 capability and then on to commissioning. So the way that you might be midway through a project, but the next project stage, which has that activity, is really when any projects entering or in the very early stages, they're the ones that we want to get the benefit from working in the system post February go live.
Great, thank you. Now we've got some questions coming through regarding queries and how queries are raised. So one of the questions is the initiator or AEMO in charge of the query for assigning the purpose of the workflow? And we do also have a question regarding sort of parallel queries that are raised from an NSP and AEMO. And perhaps it might be an opportunity for us to discuss either the dual review or the drafting review process that might occur for a query.
Yeah, I can unpack this a bit more. So I guess stepping back, anyone can raise a query. So we've got, if you think of the parties working on the project, we've got the network service provider, we've got AEMO, we've got the proponent, and any of those may have consultants that are working with them. We also have the OEM in many cases as well, participating in that dialogue. So anyone can raise a query. And I think the question was also about who would assign it. So really the assigning is like suggesting who you're expecting to respond next. So anybody can do that. Let's take an example. Maybe the NSP has raised a query and they've actually gone through that peer review process with people in their organisation, maybe with their consultant, and then they have that they've landed on what they wanted to say, what the actual query relates to in its specific terms, and then they have actually decided they also want to align and expose that to AEMO, who would then have a look at it. So all of these things can happen before it's actually posted for everybody to see. And that assigning, so if the NSP raised it, it's expected that they would assign it. But if they assign that to the proponent to respond to, and the proponent had responded, they can then also assign, they can on assign. So that's the intention of the workflow, is that you're really just assigning for who is expected to be the next person to respond. Perhaps you can prompt me, Laura, with the other parts to that question. I think there were other elements.
I think the other component that was sort of being asked here was regarding I guess the use of those who are perhaps not in an immediate organisation. I think you have answered part of it, but the question was here around Issues Tracker having previously used intermediate versions between developer, OEMs and consultants before submitting to AEMO or the NSPs. So will the hub keep this version control limited to limited stakeholders? So perhaps we wanted to just explain how a query could be either raised or the system could be set up for organisations to work with their OEMs and consultants.
Yeah. So the design was exactly as that. I mean, it's common, I guess, the proponent OEM and the proponent's consultant are really working together, and I think it was suggested maybe sort of almost in an offline to collectively respond, to really come up with their formed response. And there is the ability in the solution register to do that you actually can draft a response and go through that peer review with your consultant at OEM to bring that together before actually posting it. So that's part of the design, and that's something that's been workshopped as we've developed. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, I believe so. One of the questions we have here is, will the hub also be used to track non-compliance reporting?
Now we have had some discussions about the fact that that is an opportunity going forward. Clearly, you know, we've got a good system structured for every asset that's connected to the NEM. Then that does create an opportunity for us to be recording and capturing those non-compliances in one central place. It's not actually in scope for this project, but we do see that setting up, you know, we're doing things in bite-sized chunks, and we have got that as an opportunity for future. So hopefully that answers the question. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's as good that great minds are thinking alike about the opportunities here.
Next question will be, what technical support will be available in the event the system does not work properly? It's common for software to develop bugs for various reasons. How will this be addressed to reduce disruptions?
Yep, thanks for that. I'm happy to try and answer that. So we see this system as being important for everybody to continue their work. So it will be hosted within AEMO, and it will have support. There will be an opportunity for all users, whether they're within AEMO or anywhere in the industry, to contact support, which will be within AEMO if there is a bug or a problem that they're experiencing. And even I think we've talked about that idea of if you've got multi-factor authenticate issues because you're changing devices or resets, that would also be your place to go for support as well. So we are setting up within AEMO to be able to support I mean, we're trying to design as much as possible for each organisation to onboard their own users and really self-service in many ways. But obviously, when it comes down to bugs, the system down or anything, then having that support we know is really important, because everybody will be relying on it to continue working, and that's where the efficiencies will come from. So we're setting up for that support feature within AEMO, and we do consider it important to have the system uptime. That is an objective with the tiering system, that we it's an important system.
Great. Now, the next question we have here is, will the system be used for 539 and 5310 process?
Yeah, I did mention, I think, and Zach did too, that it's alterations are absolutely in scope. And I think I sort of was trying to explain that we consider these alterations to sometimes be greenfield, because it's an ongoing connections project, which hasn't been commissioned yet. You're actually altering it during that design before it's built. Or it could be a brownfield where it's actually an existing connected asset, or at least an asset that will be commissioned before the alteration starts. So we are catering for those alteration scenarios, which is that 539 through to 5310. So I think the question is probably around, is the NEM Connections Hub and the data is going to be structured to be able to work in that space? I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add there, Zach. Just, I think you ran through some of that piece in your slide.
Yeah, no, I just add to that yeah, in addition to the NER 539 process, but other change mechanisms as well. So S522 and also the 414P process, and certainly also catering to the unique scenario of the 534 letter amendment that is starting to appear around the place from time to time. So really catering to all of those scenarios. And as I said earlier, ensuring the tool is flexible to cater to the uniqueness of those particular alteration processes. So be it a simple or small firmware or settings change versus, adding capacity, providing that flexibility within the system.
Great, thank you. Now, a question that's asked here is, there will be common or frequently encountered issues across the project. Given the centralized nature of the hub, will proponents, OEMs, consultants have access to a live bank of common issues that are encountered during commissioning and gaps in documentation?
Do you want me to try and take
Yeah.
that? So, sorry, is the question, will everybody have access? Was that
No,
the question?
the question's about common or frequently encountered issues. So do we envisage that we'll be compiling a central sort of portal or FAQs or location for where all can access the common issues that are being encountered during commissioning or any gaps in documentation?
Yeah, okay. So I guess because we'll have the common standard view is that network service providers will see all the projects they're involved in. AEMO can see the projects they're involved in, and so that gives the individual user a natural ability to be able to filter and find topics and issues which are common. But in addition to that, yes, we will have all the information basically in one place, so it'll be easier to drill down and actually find where we're experiencing common issues. It could be common issues with particular equipment, common issues with particular region, common issues with particular technology. So absolutely, we will be able to bring that to the surface and ensure that groups that are able to address problems raised are aware of them. I think that's a huge opportunity that this solution register will bring.
And I think I'll just add that in the context of enabling greater visibility and transparency to industry, for industry to be able to be empowered to actually be able to think about those issues whilst they're actually scoping and developing a project. In the interest of that is certainly making available a compiled list of common themes across projects in terms of issues that challenges that might be encountered, or gaps in information that's provided, or different approaches that might need to be undertaken to address particular challenges. That is certainly an objective of ours in terms of being able to provide that transparency and visibility to industry. And that really is about giving you the power then to be able to actually think about those items beforehand whilst you're actually developing your project, and being able to actually think about the solutions that you might want to come to us with well before the project has even begun. So I'll hand back across to Rachel. Thanks.
Great. And Rachel, anything further to add to that? If not, I can move on to the next question.
Nothing particular. No, we can move on to the next question.
No problem. We have a question here. Is the intention that NSPs will also have access to the hub as a part of the project assessment? Will AEMO be meeting with NSPs to ensure an efficient and clear access process?
I'm hoping that it's clear from some of the material we've presented that all parties, so NSPs are a very core part of the connections process, so they would absolutely have the ability to add users and for their users to be able to work across all their projects. I'm not sure if I've understood anything nuanced in that question, but I think emphatically network service providers will be assisted to ensure that they can all access both the solution registers, and then when stage 2 comes online, when we have that expanded functionality, also that functionality as well.
Now we've got a couple of questions coming through regarding cost. So will there be additional costs charged to industry participants for the development of this system?
That's a good question. So we're building, AEMO's building both stage 1 and stage 2, basically as projects funded by AEMO and within ONC. So it does sit within AEMO's onboarding and connections standard cost recovery arrangements. And really, the hub is being designed to benefit all stakeholders. And we do see that there'll be huge efficiencies basically from the reduction in all those manual workflows, reduction in rework, and certainly having that increased governance, transparency, and having everything in that single source of truth really will benefit everybody. So we've actually looked at it and tried to understand all the savings that we would expect to flow from this, and we would see that the time savings and the effort savings will really be greater than any cost to build these systems. So we think that it's got a very strong, I guess, case for benefits for all. And within AEMO ONC, we're building it for everybody to benefit from. I can see Margarita, you've got something to add to that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I think one thing I wanted to reassure everyone about is the fact that AEMO is very, very conscious of the constrained cost environment that we're working to as an industry at the moment, and we're not the only industry that's working within a cost-constrained environment. And so, in really to take responsibility for our own part in that, one of the things we're looking to do is actually provide greater transparency and visibility of our costs, and what is driving what particular projects or initiatives or activities are actually driving those costs, and then how does that relate to providing efficiencies as well. And so that is something that we're working on as an organisation, but onboarding and connections will play a key part in that, in the context of how it provides greater transparency around its costs, what's driving those costs and the efficiencies that it's actually achieving. And it's probably worth noting that you will see in AEMO's corporate plan that onboarding and connections does have essentially a key performance indicator that is all about what measuring the cost savings that we are achieving year on year. In the context of the amount of effort that we're applying per megawatt in delivering connection projects. So that's just something to be aware of. And if you have any questions around that, please feel free to forward that to this team after this. During this session or after this session. You can put it up on Slido if you like, but more than happy to sort of talk to you in more detail about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Margarita. Thanks, Rachel. I note that we only have about 8 minutes left in our session today, and we still have lots of questions that have come through via Slido. So we might have time for 1 or 2 additional questions. Where we can't get to the questions, we'll be able to do our best to try and collate those and integrate them into our frequently asked questions session that will be posted onto our website, and then we can share the link to that once it is finalised in the coming weeks. So one of the last questions we can go through is the question's about how AEMO decided to build this build it via AEMO rather than an external contractor. So how does this compare to buying an off-the-shelf solution that has standard compliance, etc.? If the system breaks, for example, or data leaks, is the onerous therefore on AEMO?
It's good, good points that are raised. Thanks, Laura. So I think I touched on this earlier, but certainly good to unpack it again. We see that a lot of the data that we do that gets shared in this platform is highly sensitive, and with models being submitted for the network service provider to review, for AEMO to review, and in time that will become, for all connections to the NEM, it's pretty onerous to ensure that that is handled securely and stored securely. And AEMO has some we're managing the market. Obviously, we have some very high standards for how we do that with other data. And so we see that we're really well placed to play that role. I think that's probably one of the key reasons that we've taken this on to do this and to build these tools rather than to work with external third-party providers on this one. I guess there's also just, there's also the requirement to really ensure that this is fit for purpose for the connections process, and so that's another element. But really making sure that the handling of data is done to the highest standards. That's something that AEMO has done, and you're asking perhaps whether AEMO is taking on the onus of that. Yes, to a degree, but as I mentioned earlier, it really is everybody using the tools responsibility as well to ensure that they use the tools in the correct way, and that each organisation manages their user access, because that's a really key part as well of keeping the information secure, is that only people who need to see and need to use the data in the system have access, and that will be in the hands of each organisation. Anything else to add, Zach, on that?
No, I think you've nailed it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rach.
I think we've probably got one more question we can go through here. So an example has been provided stating that in a recent R0 connection application submission, it contained greater than 350 files. Is the intention to upload these files one by one, adding for each of their titles, categories, metadata into the hub? And I believe I might just even add on to that because the question asked earlier was about sort of file sizing. Do we have any restrictions around that? How do we envisage the file upload process to occur?
Thanks for that question. I might take that one to give you a bit of a break there, Rach. Yeah, no, certainly that's something that we're very mindful of. So something that we're working through at the moment is really focusing on the user interface and the user experience in terms of the variety of artifacts that will be submitted. So I guess when we think about the fact that there's often hundreds of files that form part of a submission, really looking to group those in artifacts, which in a lot of cases there might be, say, 20 to 30 roughly, which is of course a bit more manageable, and just looking at how we can maintain those structures, especially with nested folders for different model software files, etc., is really front of mind. And to that second point around sizing is, yes, absolutely right at the front of our mind in terms of making sure that the system is capable of basically receiving and storing and providing access to what are quite large packages in a lot of cases. So the answer is yes, that's all being considered.
And just from my front, one thing that I might just note is, to whoever asked that question, we'd really be interested in understanding how large, or just the and I'm trying to get my words correct here, but just the onus or the burden that might place on you to have to provide so many files for a connection application. I guess one of the things that we're looking at more broadly across onboarding and connections is how can we minimise that burden on connection applicants and also NSPs, and so for us there's a question there around understanding exactly what all of that information what all of those particular packages contain, and what information is really needed and what might not be needed, or what can be dealt with more efficiently. So to whoever asked that question, we'd really welcome you reaching out to us individually and sort of working with us on building that understanding so that we can look at how we might actually tackle the root cause of the issue, rather than only addressing the symptom. So yes, so please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Thanks. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Margarita. Thanks, Zach. If we could just move to our last slide, we're just coming to the close of the webinar. So this presentation has been a high-level overview of the NEM Connections Hub, or the Hub, as I see a lot of people are starting to call it, which is great. We want the phrase to catch on. So as you've mentioned, this is being delivered through a staged delivery process, and the timeframes will be listed on our website, and we can share them more broadly following this webinar. The stakeholder feedback has actively shaped the design, which we really appreciate that throughout the design process. The NEM Connections Hub is expected to improve visibility, efficiency, traceability, and secure collaboration. And there will be further opportunities to engage and prepare for the implementation of the Hub as it progresses. Following this webinar, we'll send you an email with links to the presentation slides from today and also the recording, and also on our website, where we will post ongoing updates regarding the Hub and how the development has occurred. As I mentioned, there are several questions that we didn't get to during this session. We've got lots of questions that are continuously coming through, so we'll do our best to work them into our frequently asked questions portion on our website, so hopefully they will be answered for you long term. Now, if you've got any further information that you'd like from us or questions, as Margarita has mentioned, please feel free to contact us on contact.connections@aemo.com.au. We'll do our best to come back to you following this session. Now, we've just posted on the webinar a question that we would really like you to answer. All responses will be anonymous. So the question is, following today's session, how confident are you that the NEM Connections Hub is progressing in a way that will support the energy transition? So if you can just click one of those 5 multiple choice selections there, that would be really great. Once you've done that, we have concluded the AEMO webinar for the NEM Connections Hub. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today, and we really hope that this has been worthwhile. We look forward to further collaborating moving forward throughout the progress of the Hub. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.